Good morning and welcome to the Business Lens from Rapid Television Abuja. It is great to have you with us on this beautiful edition where we look at how all the numbers and figures, how it directly affects you and your businesses. My name is Divine Alex. So let's begin with the key business trends that matter right now, starting from the headlines. Nigeria is spending more just to service debt, and the numbers are rising fast. In 2025 alone, total debt service climbed to nearly 16 trillion naira. That is 22.9% higher than what was recorded in 2024. And this is a major part of the pressure that came from domestic debt payments, which jumped 46.6% to 8.61 trillion naira, now accounting for more than half of Nigeria's total debt servicing costs. Now, from that one, we move to the next story where despite massive spending and heavy food imports, we still have many Nigerians that are still feeling, not feeling any relief at the market. Now, the food prices remain high even after the country imported food worth 7.65 trillion naira in 2025. This is raising fresh concerns about whether current government interventions are actually solving the affordability crisis for households and businesses. Now, on to the next, where money has now been shared across the three tiers of government. The Federation Account Allocation Committee that says that they distributed 2.036 trillion naira for March 2026 revenues to the federal government, the state, and the local government. That allocation is supposed to cover statutory revenues, VAT receipts, and augmentation funds. Now to the next, where we have, I don't know if you've noticed, the whole airtime and data borrowing services. And now if you've really noticed any changes, this is why. The FCCPC has approved 5 new companies to operate as airtime and data lenders after fresh regulations pushed all major mobile networks, including MTN. We also have Airtel, Globacom, and TTU to suspend the service. That is the borrowing service directly. Now to the next, where there have been major changes in the President Tinubu's government's cabinet, that with the former finance minister Wale Edun and the former housing minister Ahmed Dangewa exiting the government, while the presidency insists that both men resigned voluntarily. But the circulation, trended over, I think, the beginning of the week that especially Wale Edun, that he was sacked. But the government is saying that they actually tendered their resignation. We also have the situation where the Minister of Power, Adebayo Adelabu, who has also stepped down, with his resignation taking effect April 30th, as he prepares to pursue his governorship ambition in Oyo State, marking a fresh shake-up across key economic ministries. Next up is Nigeria's exported 55.39 million barrels of crude oil in the first 2 months of 2026, even as the 650,000 barrel per day Dangote refinery faces domestic feedstock shortages, with a total production at 81.94 million barrels, leaving only 26.55 million barrels for local refineries and forcing increased crude imports. And to the next, the Debt Management Office, DMO, has allotted 3.64 billion naira in its April 2026 federal government savings bond offer, covering a 2-year bond manufacturing in April 2028 and a 3-year bond maturing in April 2029, highlighting steady retail investor appetite for government-backed securities. Away from that story, we move to the next one, where Nigeria's domestic debt data shows the federal government raised 100 billion naira through the Unclaimed Funds Trust Fund. The fund, as of December 31st, 2025, formally integrating dormant private funds into its borrowing framework, while total domestic debt stood at 80.49 trillion naira, which is led by the FGN bonds at 63.63 trillion naira, or you could say 79.06%. And we also have the treasury bills at 13.85 trillion naira. You could also say in figures 17.21%. Now, from that story, we head straight into the market, where Nigeria's equities market has extended its bullish run today, being 23rd of April 2026, with investors gaining about 861 billion naira as renewed buying interest pushed the Nigerian exchange higher, despite softer overall sentiment in some counters. We will look at those stories and more after the break. I am Divine Alex. Stay with us. Okay, you are welcome back. This is still the Business Lens of Rapid Television, Abuja. My name is Divine Alex. Now, across today's headlines, we have a clear pattern that is emerging. Nigeria is managing higher revenues, higher spending, and higher financial activity. But the pressure points are still visible beneath the surface. We have debt servicing that has climbed to 16 trillion naira. We also have food imports that have crossed 7.65 trillion naira without easing market prices. And despite strong crude production, domestic refineries are still facing feedstock shortages. At the same time, government is reshaping fiscal flows through FAC allocations, new borrowing tools like saving bonds and unclaimed funds, while policy shifts in telecoms, energy, and cabinet leadership continue to reshape the economic landscape. Even the equities market is also rallying, but unevenly. So the key question today is not just what is happening, but whether these moving parts are building resilience or simply reflecting a system under persistent strain. Let's unpack this with our analyst. I have with me Daniel Effa, who is a global business analyst. Good morning, Daniel.
Good morning, Divine. How are you doing today?
I'm doing all right. I also have economist Abiola Adekunle from Key to Markets. Good morning, economist Abiola. Economist Abiola, I can't hear you.
Yeah, I can hear you. Good morning.
Okay,
it's good to be here.
Good morning. Thank you for being on the show, both of you. Now, let's start the conversation proper, starting from the Nigeria's debt service that has surged to 16 trillion naira worth domestic payments, now driving more than half of total obligations. Now, let me start with you, economist Abiola. At what point do you think this debt servicing stops being a fiscal management tool and start becoming a structural drain on national development capacity?
I would say we are there already.
Okay.
It's not a future tense. It's something that is already happening because there's something called the debt cycle.
Okay.
Debt cycle is described as a situation where the revenue that you're making is only enough to service your debt or lower than the amount you need to service your debt. That means that for you to be able to pay off your debt, you either have to borrow more debt, take more debt rather, borrow more money, or at the end of the day, increase productivity. So we're already at that point where whatever we're generating is basically just going into servicing of debt. So for us to be able to push and get more funds to be able to make more structural changes, infrastructure, development, let's analyze in that direction. That actually now inputs in revenue would mean that I borrow more or we increase internal productivity that can give us more revenue.
Okay, let me come to you, Daniel. Now, if over 50% of debt pressure is domestic, does that signal confidence in local borrowing or a shrinking in fiscal space for real investment?
Now, I think it's a function of both because when you say we're having local borrowing at a very high rate, it's largely because of the fact that the rates are high, right? So the rates are incentivized for the borrowers or for the lenders, and that is why everybody jumps on offer from the whether it is treasury bills or bonds, and so at the end of the day, we still, I think what is particular about this conversation is that we've not left the era of the debt cycle, even though we've cut out a lot in terms of the incentives that the Nigerian people get, right? So that is a big issue, and we are still there. The debt cycle is still there, but then you can see that it is more about getting more money than what the money is being used for. And the fact that you have access to more money means you have no choice than to keep your interests high, right? So because that's the only way investors would get excited to basically jump on your what's the word, on your debt products, right? However,
Okay.
In the ideal conversations, you go into you invest in particularly in bonds or treasury bills based on two factors as an investor. Yes, the returns being high, and also the fact that the country is doing well economic wise. That makes not just the debt now, that makes it worthwhile for an investor to push in to want to subscribe to borrowings. What we have here is just the first one, which is the
Okay.
fact that our interest rate is very, very high compared to our counterparts in emerging markets.
Okay.
And that is basically why we have access to more money. And as long as we are excited about that, we will keep getting access to more money. But then it comes at a cost, because the cost it comes at is that because the
Mm.
interest is quite high,
Okay.
you will be paying very, very high rates for servicing, and that is where we are right now, where our fiscal component is very high when it comes to debt servicing, because we keep getting we keep accruing very expensive debts, even
Mm.
though what determines debt component is inflation. And you've said that you've seen data from the MBS that shows that inflation has really gone down drastically, and it's only normal, ideally, that your borrowing rate should also go down. So the
Mm.
fact that you are still keeping it high means that there's something that you are looking at. That means the focus is not really about tightening the economy, which has always been your statement. It has always been about being able to have access to more funds, and that is what the CBN is basically doing.
Oh, okay. I like that you mentioned that. Okay, now that we have changes in the finance ministry, because we had the former finance minister, Wale Dun, resign or
Yeah.
sacked. I don't even know which of the word. But then a lot of people are saying that this could have a negative impact on the economy. So what do you think about this?
I think that when it comes to the economy
Daniel, are
as a
you there?
whole, the minister was a coordinating minister of the economy,
Okay.
right?
Yes.
Yes, I am. I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now. Please go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can
So I
now.
said that. Okay. So I said that. Okay, good. So I said that the fact that the Minister of Finance was the coordinating minister of the economy meant that we would the sensitivity of his position would really play a role in whatever direction the present government is going towards. However, we've read different reports, but then I think the official report now is that he actually did resign, citing 8 reasons. I think we talked about this on the show, was in December, where we talked about the fact, was in December or November, where he had this the health issue, and we're like, it's important that he is replaced on
If
time, because a coordinating minister of the economy is meant to be held because the economy is largely dependent on him, and the fact that where we are economic wise is too sensitive for us to have an ailing minister. All right, so if the government is saying we are replacing someone that is not healthy, I think it is justified, and the markets would react accordingly, which is basically react indifferent, right? Markets will not be too bad or too good. It's just indifferent because we simply replaced cognitive social economy that had health challenge.
okay, let me come to you, Economist Abiola. Now, with this whole changes that we now have Taiwo Yedele as the finance minister and coordinating minister for the economy, now, do you think that somehow we could get to a part where we would say that some of the projects that, maybe Wale Dun was implementing or trying to get done, that the new minister might not follow suit, leaving us at a place where we have to stay at a standstill on some of those new things that they were bringing, reforms rather, that they were bringing, and then we not have this new person? Do you think this can affect the markets, our investors who could likely be coming into the country to give us some cash?
I like the fact you mentioned give us some cash. I hope I'm involved and added to that. The number of
Not raw cash. I know.
One thing I've seen over time is that everybody has what we call their brainchild. Everyone has their own mindset, okay, on how they feel things should be done. That is why you never see two sets of people being brought up in the same way, because there's practically no manual for specificity. Jolt and bring up. So Mr. Tayo Idele might have his own ideas. You know, it's limited to his own mind and his close allies for now. We have to just wait and see. But luckily, I think that government is a continuum. And I think that one way or the other, we should be seeing much more of the continuation of what the former minister, Mr. Edun, has started.
Okay.
So I think that we will see completion of some of the projects because this is not really political. You know, when it's in politics, people come in to spite their predecessor and they will abandon the project while doing and start their own project, which might also not be finished. But this is under the same political party. It's a continuum. They are all playing for the same
person. Okay, I think we are losing you.
So expect to see either.
Okay. Thank you so much, Economist Abel, for that one. Let's take a swipe. Let's take a swipe to the food imports versus market reality. Now, we have a situation that despite 7.65 trillion naira in food imports, we still have food prices that are still relatively high across the country. Please don't tell me about rice. I know that it is only rice that we have finally found a way to get down from 100,000 to maybe around 60 something thousand. Now, why do you think we have massive import intervention and at the same time it is not translating into food affordability for households? And is Nigeria facing a distribution problem rather than a supply problem?
Okay, there are so many things that affect the price of food being imported. Number one is at the point of entry. What amount of tax are we seeing on food imports? Because if somebody imports something that is meant to be 20 naira and there's tax of 10 naira, then that means that more or less that thing is going to be above 30 naira. So we have to first of all look at the ports. What real tax are they facing? I'm not talking about what is on paper, what is theory. No, I'm talking about what is the actual, reality on ground. Then when you move from there, you now go into transport. Now, you brought in the food cheap, but this food has to still get to all the parts of the country, right? The major port in Nigeria is in Lagos, but this food has to get to Katsina, it has to get to Kano, it has to get to Calabar, it has to get to the middle and the roads, and the amount of a liter of fuel, that is PMS, affects the end price at of the day. Now, number three, profitability and human behavior. There are people that at the end of the day, irrespective of the amount they buy it, they will always add a certain level of profit on it because they would also tell you that everything has gone up. So they also have to make more money. By the time you add just these three points, you see that the price might be as cheap as possible. So what we need the government to do is first of all to look at the ports and see if you import, I'm going to mention rice, if you import 1 bag of rice, how much are they charging on it at the port? How much does it take to transport 1 bag of rice to the north or to the east or to the west? Then the rest, about profitability, you cannot really do much there because everybody is independent to put whatever amount they want. But if the source material is very cheap, the margin put on it at the end of the day will still make it affordable. So in terms of importation, apart from these 3 points, there are other points, but importing it alone in terms of the volume is not enough. What actually is the amount being charged on it? What is the ease of movement? We're talking about the supply chain, not just the supply alone, but the chain. The chain involves the road, involves everything that they have to meet on the road. If you go to some parts of Nigeria, you will meet 8 to 20 checkpoints.
Okay.
And at all those checkpoints, you have to drop something. All these things will add to to the end product price at the end of the day.
Okay. There's also, I think it was last week where we had the situation where they said there's waiver for some imported stuff, import duty waivers, and I think rice is one of them. So it was reduced to a certain level. But let me come to Daniel. Now, could structural inefficiencies in logistics, like Economist Abella mentioned when he was citing some of these things, and down to storage and market assets, be neutralizing fiscal interventions? I mean, when we talk about food imports and market reality.
Okay, so I think that I think we talked about it. Was our last session? Was our two or three editions of the show where we were talking about what the World Bank was talking about when it comes to food. Just like I usually say, I think that I'm still of the opinion that we have not figured out a food plan yet. What we are still doing is that we don't have a policy direction when it comes to food. What we basically have is just everybody comes in and look at the political pressure, look at what's happening with the people, look at inflation, and simply makes a quick fix on food, right? We've had different government before this. We had a government that was specific about pushing a lot of investments into food, particularly rice. When we say a lot of investment in rice, but then questions should be asked that how effective has that been? Because if you spend over a trillion and over 1.2 trillion there was spent on Angkor Bora's program that was targeted at improving the production of rice, right? If you spent that amount, right, and fast forward 4 or 5 years later, you still don't have an increase in local supplies, that you need to create import waivers, right? So this is the problem. You create import waivers, you kill the progress you are doing with that because you've not even assessed what the previous component. Are we improving how many metric tons we produce a day? Is it up to 75% of local consumption capacity? It is those moves, right, that would now inform you just saying, okay, let's do import waivers and let's limit it to how many tons a day because supply conversations is data based, it's not wish based, right? So I think more often than not, the government is just basically wish based. Let's just drop the inflation, like it doesn't matter. So what we are seeing now is that people that are meant to improve our local supply have switched back to importations because they feel like it is cheaper. That's what the government is giving free tax-free import duties on. And the quality doesn't matter what the quality is. Whatever gains we made from that, we should just move on and we'll push the problem to the next person coming. And that's a very big problem with the economy in terms of the policy direction. I've always maintained the fact that, particularly for food, if we are going to be, if we are going to maintain or sustain our poverty rate, which is very, very high at the moment, if we are going to bring it down, we need to have blueprints that are law in terms of direction for essentials like food and security, energy security. These are conversations, and even national security, which is the actual infrastructural state of the security. Those things have to be things that every government comes in and they follow to the latter. Whatever happens on monetary policy doesn't matter because that's usually a function of whatever is happening globally and locally, right? So, but when it comes to the essentials, which is what matters to the Nigerian people, you should have a blueprint. So because I'm looking at what we've done with rice. I'm saying that we've not done any. There's no win for the government so far. We've just seen when you just look back, you just see a lot of money is being wasted. And now with this new policy, what point does it stop? Right? What point? Because if it stops, inflation goes up again, right? So are we now back to pre 2015 where we basically just import any form of rice back in Benin Republic, back anywhere, and we just sell. And so the lack of policy direction is really, really, really hurting the economy than normal, and is creating is creating an opposite incentive, right? Disincentivizing people that are stakeholders in that space to properly build structures. So, for example, if I'm an investor, maybe during the Buhari era, for example,
Okay.
I followed the policy of the government, and
Okay.
I've gotten Angkor Bora's program. I've pushed a lot of supply, built farmlands. You get for the production of rice, and suddenly 4 years later or 3 years later, another government comes in, changes the entire policy and says there's an import waiver. So people can import waiver means people can pack in their numbers. So because the way Nigerians work is that they will pack in their numbers. People will order the product. So people will, they will sell a few. They will sell a few to keep the prices high so they can keep making money. So it is a very very confused state that we are in. I'm happy inflation is going down, but to what end? What
To
is the
what
point or
end?
what is the essence of Nigerians? They are suffering subsidy removal and all, prices
Okay.
skyrocketing, and they are not getting any win from it at the end of the day.
Okay, now, thank you so much, Daniel, for that one. But let's take a swipe to the next headline that I find really interesting, since we are still somewhere around import and export. Exports, I just added export to it. Now, Nigeria exported 55.39 million barrels of crude oil in just 2 months, while domestic refineries still struggle with feedstock supply. Now, on you, Daniel, how do you think this whole crude producing economy, should continue exporting raw resources while its domestic refining capacity, is looking like it's remaining undersupplied and dependent?
Well, I think I've always been of the opinion that Dangote refinery should not depend on Nigeria for its supply. Yeah,
Okay.
yes, there is the factor of nearness to raw materials, which is a basic economic conversation, right? However, the Nigeria that you are depending on is not completely ready in terms of supply, right? It's not. We have a lot to still do. We have a lot that we're not doing. The local investors that are now in the space still need like this 3, 4, 5, good 6 years to get it right in terms of new oil wells and all. Right, even Dangote refinery itself, I think, is also working on getting oil fields, or they already have oil fields that looking at exploring. Right, until we get to that point, for now, the Dangote refinery would have to blend our crude with cheaper crude, because in the first place our crude is expensive. Yeah, it's a top quality, but it's above the benchmark, which ideally is a cause of concern, because in Nigeria that is selling to, which is his primary market, about 60-70% of what we consume is being produced, is being supplied by him. We don't have the capacity to pay. Like 1,400, 1,300, everybody was complaining. So
Okay.
the only issue is that he actually needs to balance his supply by simply what's the word? By simply blending with cheaper crude, so that we are concerned about the pricing. The supply, where the crude oil exploration is an NNPCL issue, and I feel that they need to work around it, because
Okay.
I've given up on the fact that we will get to 2 million barrels. I think I'm not optimistic anymore. I think we will
Okay.
not, because we cannot achieve it.
But please don't give up on us. Don't give up on us.
Uh,
Thank you so
it
much,
is not. It's the
Daniel.
data that says that.
The data, right? Okay, over to you, Economist Abiola. Now, do you think this whole issue is, contractual allocation, or it's just, as, what's the word? Policy allocation, policy misalignment, or lack of integrated energy planning?
Well, that's a lot of big words. Putting it in simple terms, I'll just say that we need to invoke real acts of patriotism. And I'm not talking about Dangote, I'm talking about even the government.
Okay.
There has to be a way for them to sit down and be able to see eye to eye. Take for example what's going on in the world right now. Let's assume that it's even worse than this, and that we practically cannot import a liter of crude oil or a barrel of crude oil, and for Dangote to refine. And let's assume that we can also not export as much. At the end of the day, home is home. At the end of the day, we are all in the same country. We are all Nigerians. Because when you push too much, policy this and that, you use a lot of semantics to cover what actually is. At the end of the day, nobody's going anywhere. So let's assume that we never had a refinery internally, then the discussion will be different. But now that we have, I think that to a large extent, there should be much more conversations between Dangote and the government. And this is not because of Dangote. This is because we know that in the future, there are still going to be other refineries that will be built in Nigeria. So once there's a proper precedent that, the Nigerian government will find a way to give, a certain level of allocation to its internal refiners, then it makes everything easier. For me, at the end of the day, I just want anything that will make the lives of an average Nigerian easier.
Okay, let's take a swipe to the borrowing innovation versus fiscal exposure story. Now I'm going to come back to Daniel because he hinted something about the fact that he doesn't think that the whole borrowing, getting funds from every angle conversation. I think he hinted that. Now the government is raising funds through multiple channels. We have 100 billion naira unclaimed funds, then 3.64 billion saving bonds, and a debt stock of 80.49 trillion naira, which is dominated by bonds and T-bills. Now, is Nigeria building a more diversified domestic funding ecosystem, or simply expanding the definition of what counts as government borrowing? Daniel, are you there?
Nigeria is just borrowing more. We are. I think I've explained this before. We are almost like in a Ponzi scheme, kind of, in a debt cycle.
Okay.
Where we are basically we are not in any way working to improve our fiscal conversation, and that is a big issue, right? Why is this a big issue? Is because you need yes, you have monetary policy, right? Yes, you have a monetary policy to help you tighten or losing the economy based on whatever is happening in terms of price stability. However, you need skilled fiscal conversation, right? A country will never perform or outperform its fiscal ability. It's not possible. Whatever you use money for plays a major role in what you achieve, right? We are depending a whole lot, right, on Nigerians getting FDIs, not the government really pushing to create infrastructural development that would actually attract the FDIs, right? We are seeing our government simply spend so much on recurrent expenditure. I was seeing reports about the fact that our health budget alone, right, is so abysmal. We are wondering, is there a plan, right, to have an health budget, a federal health budget, right? So if a country that cannot properly feed is due to high cost of living, that is struggling with day-to-day operation because of lack of infrastructure, and is not healthy, how do you guarantee economic prosperity, right? So forget about the numbers, about the debt and all. These debts are over the roof, right? And no matter how you say yes, debt to GDP, that conversation is mischievous. Why?
Okay.
Because when you say debt to GDP and you say it is within the reach, is within World Bank or acceptable IMF acceptable standards, the conversation is the quality of life. Right? Everybody wants to know the quality of life, not necessarily whatever your GDP. Exactly. So because your GDP is just a representation of what happens in your country, economic activity, simple. But then economic activity getting to 80% or 95% of the people, no. That's why data still comes out that still says that we are extremely at our poverty level has skyrocketed, right? So when it comes to fiscal conversations, I just laugh whenever I see a lot of grammar. It is the same thing. It boils out to
the same thing.
It's either you are managing it properly or not.
Okay, thank you so much, Daniel, for that one. Economist Abiola, in 1 minute, can you make a comment as regards to this whole 100 billion naira and plenty figures, as regards to the fact that we're looking at the fact that it's looking like the government is borrowing a lot of things, the fuel subsidy removed, the tax reforms, in play. So it's looking like, they are actually drawing in a lot of money, but somehow we don't have strong, things to show for all of this. So let me take your comment on that.
Well, at the end of the day, the whole thing rests on the Nigerian citizens, because we have been discussing this particular topic for months, if not years, in different shapes and forms, that if we keep borrowing for things that will not bring out revenue, then how do we hope to pay back? If an average, I'm a Yoruba man, if I go and borrow because I want to do a party, how does a party increase my salary for me to be able to pay back my loan, especially if that particular debt is something that can affect my lifestyle? So we've said this over and over and over again. And I think that at this point, what needs to be done is for Nigerians to actually start talking to their representatives in the House of Assembly, because I don't think any of these loans come in without the National Assembly as a whole, stamping it and saying, okay, go ahead and take this loan. So if everybody has to now have a town hall meeting with their honorable, with their senators, and get a brief on what exactly is going on, because whether you like it or not, when it comes to time for these loans to be paid, Nigerians are the ones that will pay it. People say, no, I know they owe anybody anything, or then you are just a joker, because you're paying through VAT, you're paying through taxes, you're paying through the way the whole quality of life is depreciating. You're paying through the cost of goods. So whether you like it or not, every loan that is being taken that is not being paid back from the revenue that the loan is meant to service, and the loan just fizzles out like that, Nigerians are the ones to pay. So at the end of the day, it rests on us to actually start having meetings and conversations with our representatives to see where we can, go from here. Okay,
thank you so much for that one. And now let's head to the equities market update for today. Now, the NGX All Share Index rose 0.61% to 209,586.20 points, while total market capitalization climbed to 141.38 trillion naira. And the banking stocks led gains that rose to 2.03%, followed by insurance 1.07%, consumer goods at 0.45%, industrial goods at 0.15%, and energy at 0.02%. Meanwhile, we have heavyweight stocks like MTN Nigeria, Dangote Cement, Seplat, and Zenith Bank continuing to anchor market momentum, helping premium broad valuation hit 54.3 trillion naira. Thank you so much, economist Abiola and Daniel, for being on the show today. And that is it on today's Business Lens. See you on the next episode for another interesting takes and hot headlines. Follow us across our digital platforms at Rapid TV, and don't forget to stay with Rapid TV. My name is Divine Alex. Bye for now.